My son, he was 6 when he was murdered. It was just probably a month after I had buried Jacob. It had been days I had not slept, and I knew if I was going to survive, I had to talk to someone. And I came across Dr. Cacciatore's blog, and I read about her daughter. I read it over and over. I would email her almost every day. The Miss Foundation is the utmost support for me. You think in situations like this that your family would be there, and my family was afraid. In the end, it felt good to tell the world about my son.
It was 1994, and I was expecting my 4th child, and she died very suddenly and traumatically, and it really rocked my world. And I descended into a pretty dark place where I wasn't sure I was going to make it. You know, and human beings wanted to make me better. They wanted to make me feel better. And I didn't want to feel better. I wanted to feel. And my dogs accepted exactly how I felt. When I was crying, they would just lay down next to me, and that was the perfect thing. And so I started really understanding the human-animal connection at that point. Then last year, I met the best therapist in the world. I was planning a hike for many, many years, and we were 3 minutes into the trail. There was a pack animal that had his whole back full of coolers and backpacks and tents hiking out of a pretty treacherous trail, and he had fallen, and his knees were bleeding and his head was bleeding, and his handler was hitting him, trying to get him up. I sat down on the trail with that horse, and I could see in his eyes this hopelessness that I had felt 2 decades earlier when my child died. And I could see that he was on the brink of death and not sure that he wanted to live, the same way I wasn't sure that I wanted to live in 1994. And I promised him that I would get him out of there if I could, and I did. 2.5 days later, I was able to get him out.
That's right.
After being relatively alone and isolated for a long time, I knew that I didn't want other families to have to go through this experience alone. So 2 years after Cheyenne died, I started the Miss Foundation, and we're an international nonprofit. We help families whose children have died or are dying from any cause at any age. Unfortunately, a lot of them, before they were coming to us, they were being thrust, wrongfully so, into the medical system, because grief isn't a medical issue. Grief is an existential, deeply human issue. What we're doing now doesn't work. It just doesn't work. We're disconnecting, we're not connecting. The problem that I've been running into is that sometimes I get 3 or 4 families who want to come at the same time. And right now, all I can hold is just one family. So our next big plan is the Selah house, which will be a care farm and respite center for the traumatically bereaved. And so what we'll do is integrate rescue animals, care farming, ecotherapies, barefoot hiking, working with the earth, yoga, contemplative practices into an actual place. So much of what we'll be doing, we've already been doing on a smaller scale. And so really we're responding to the needs of the community.
In the UK, care farming is slowly taking off. There's, at the time of the most recent research, there's I think about 280 different care farms of varying sizes. I found out about the ways in which people were using these sort of agricultural spaces to help various disadvantaged and vulnerable groups. And I was just amazed and really inspired by the difference that being around and interacting with animals can make to people's lives. We're seeing care farming used for people's mental health problems, anxiety, depression, stress, as well as we're starting to look at applying care farming to traumatic grief, because it just makes so much sense, because there's a lot of freedom that comes with being on the farm compared to your conventional therapy setting.
Treatment as usual is contributing to an incredible epidemic of early death and of loss. I became so spiritually anguished by having to live a lie of telling or acting like people had broken brains, when in fact they were experiencing existential traumas or existential problems. And so this lack of tolerance for true human emotion has become very, very quickly not tolerated. So what's unique about what Joanne is trying to accomplish is that it's real healing, it's not a medical model, and it depathologizes the experience of being human.
When I heard Dr. Cacciatore talk about care farming, I got really excited because that was the type of treatment that I would like to see used in the veteran community. 22 veterans and active duty personnel commit suicide every day. And that's an epidemic. And that's 22 lives that don't need to be lost. And you know, veteran mental health care doesn't have to be complicated. It's very simple. That's what, you know, care farming is too. It's very simple. It's back to basics. When you have an animal that's been abused, like there's a startle response in the animal. And you see a lot of that with the veteran population too. And to match a veteran with an animal, there's therapy in that. And there's a lot of good that can come out of that.
So I can say without a doubt that Joanne saved my life. When Ronan was diagnosed with cancer, I mean, my life changed in the blink of an eye. I couldn't really process that he was dying. And I grabbed my other son, Quinn, and said, "It's time to go home now." And I'll never forget, he looked at me and said, "Well, is Ronan coming?" And I had to say no. He's not coming with us. And, I'm supposed to go back to my normal life, which there's nothing normal about it anymore. If I would have had a place like that to go to after Ronan died, I feel like my family would have suffered less. I would have not been so scared and destructive. When I found the Mist Foundation, it was like the first time that I felt like I might be able to survive this. I stopped taking everything. I don't want to be numb to my pain. The Carefarm has the potential to save so many lives. It just makes so much more sense than the barbaric way we treat bereaved parents.
The exciting thing for me is that we're bringing human beings who have suffered together with animals who have suffered. We need more of this, because what we're doing now, it isn't working. We're creating more suffering. We're not eradicating suffering. There's nowhere in the United States where people can go like this. It's the first place.